To another video. This is video C of our MLA format videos. This is the last video to watch. On the PowerPoint that's on Blackboard, I'm starting this with video 23 and I'll go all the way to the end. Video number 3 talks about something that I talked about at the end of the last video, which is sometimes your citations could be wrong if you do use them through citation generator. So again, I like to copy and paste them directly from Purdue OWL, like I showed you in a previous video. And it just depends on what type of source you're looking at. So ask yourself, what type of source are you looking at? And then you can go on to Purdue OWL and look on the left-hand side. Look at your looking books or electronic sources. You can set a YouTube video if you need to. I would advise maybe not using a YouTube video, but if you needed to, you could. And so other things about MLA format. I already talked about this. Block quotes is what I wanted to talk about. So if you have a shorter quotation, just a few lines, you would do them you would have like set up the quote and you would have just quote and quotation marks like I've been kind of showing like these. These would be shorter quotations. So you have like just either set up the quote and then you have just a small piece of information in quotation marks there. But if you have a quote that's 4 or more lines, what you need to do is you just tab over. So if I did this, I'll show you what this looked like originally. So if I just copy and paste a large paragraph into my work, it's going to look like this. So if you had a regular paragraph that you wrote, it would probably look like this, something similar. You just tab over. But if you want to have a large quote that's 4 lines or longer, you need to have a block quote. And a block quote simply means that you tab over all of your lines all the way like you would do the first line in a sentence that you wrote, in a paragraph that you wrote. The difference between this and a smaller quote is that you actually don't need quotation marks. So you would have just tabbed over and you would introduce it. You would have something else. So maybe you have your paragraph. You would say like, for example, and then you have that. And then you have the in-text citation at the end. I would not advise using too many block quotes, especially in a shorter paper like you are all writing for this class. The reason why is because it bogs down with too much information, and it can sometimes get away from what you're trying to say in your own voice. So if only use a block quote if you 100% absolutely have to, but don't necessarily use a block quote all the time. So if you're writing a 4-page paper and you have 4 block quotes, that means that probably half your paper is other people's language. So I would say, I don't have a rule for this, but in order, if you have a problem, maybe strive to have no more than like 25% of your essay be other people's words and the rest of it be your language. I want to be able to see your voice in your papers. I want to be able to see what you're thinking. Other people's writing is just evidence. Right? It's just evidence to show what you're trying to say. But that is what a block quote is. So that is on slide 25. Others of these are just kind of simple information that you may have heard of before. If you have a quote and you need to, the quote is so long and you don't need all the information, you can omit those words by having 3 dots. So you'd have ... So this is saying many things, including the MLA format, ... Because sometimes if you have a long quote, you don't need all the information in there. You just need a few words, but it's not necessarily right next to each other. So by having that ... It's called an ellipsis marks, those 3 dots. By having that, you're showing that there are other words or other pieces of information in between the information you're providing. So, but you don't need that for this quote for your essay. So it's showing that you're not plagiarizing, and so it's pretty helpful. Other parts, if you're adding words to a quote, this is helpful sometimes if you have a piece of a quote and they left out a necessary piece of information that your readers need. So maybe they said that piece of information like earlier in their essay or their book, but they don't say it in the exact quote that you want. In order to do that, you would have brackets. So the brackets show that you are writing those words, but you are not, that it's not from the actual author themselves. You're just adding information that's helpful for your audience to understand. So it's a really neat way. It's just going to add that information in without having to bog down the quote or have your reader confused about what you're talking about. Summary and paraphrases. They still all need to be cited, okay? So even if you don't have a direct quote, if any idea that's not your own is in your essay, you need to cite it. So that means a summary or paraphrase. So summaries are kind of condensed versions of a larger work. So if you have like a larger book and you can summarize it into a few sentences or a paragraph. A paraphrase is often shorter. So you're putting both in your own words, okay? You're still putting both in your own words, but summary is a large text that you're condensing, and a paraphrase is maybe a single idea or a single quote. So you can paraphrase one sentence and put it in your own words. If you're paraphrasing, it should not be their identical words. So earlier I was showing examples of maybe like niche some quotes. So like you have partial part of it. So maybe there's some words in that quote that you just can't replicate, that you need them. So if you need to do that, you can just have part of a quote and like other be paraphrased and then cite that, but you don't have to. So paraphrasing, when somebody paraphrases or summarizes, it shows me as a reader that they understand the original quote more. If somebody's quote happy, they're probably putting way too much information in that essay, and I, again, lose their voice. But I don't always know if they quite comprehend or understand, especially if the information around that quote doesn't quite make sense or they're not analyzing that quote. Because if you have some piece of information, you always want to show how or why it matters to why it matters to your essay in general. How is this supporting your thesis overall? And also pay attention to placement of punctuation and citations and everything else. So if you have a question about MLA format at all, please let me know. If you need to email me a citation or outside source to look at, please let me know and I will be happy to do that. Otherwise, have a good day.